Hey folks, it's John with another AIFA conversation. Today's talk is with Jeneta St. Clair. She is an actress and stand-up comedian. We talk about growing up in the Midwest, church, high school, bartending while drunk, and bartending while sober. I also found out that she didn't get the nerve to get up on stage and do stand-up until after she got sober. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Jeneta St. Clair. How long have you been sober?
I have been sober. I am a year, 5 months, and a few days, and coming up on a year and a half. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Coming up on a year and a half. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's been a wild ride for sure. Actually, somebody just texted me and they were like, "Congrats on sobriety." And in my mind, I'm like, "Oh yeah, no, I have time." I said that the other day. I was like, "Oh, I have time." I don't have time. I have a year and 5 months, which, I mean, is a year and 5 months, and that's great. But yeah, I have a year and 5 months. It feels like a lifetime ago that I was actually drinking. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Can I ask you what drew you to drinking, or when did you start? Was it something, I know a lot of these things are often deep rooted in childhood or high school or,
Yeah. For me, it was like always the coolest thing. I definitely started drinking and smoking cigarettes because my older siblings did it, and I thought it was really, really cool. And I remember when I was younger, I mean, when I'm saying younger, I'm talking like, I want to say like 6. I remember loving the smell of beer. I loved it so much. And I would take my dad's like beer bottle caps and I would just sniff them because I loved the smell of beer so much. And I don't know if that means like that's when it all got serious, but I used to pretend like incense sticks were cigarettes. And then I stole my brother's cigarettes from my mom's like dresser because she stole them from him. And so I started, and that was when I was in like 5th grade. Um, and the first time though that I would have like my parents would be like, here, like you can try wine or you can have a sip of beer, or whatever. Not like never wanted us to drink by any means, like at that age. But it was just like, I don't know. I grew up in the Midwest. It was just kind of like how it was. And so when I first drank, though, I think I was 14 was the first time like I really drank, and it was a house party, and it was like a vodka lemonade type mix, and somebody was like, "Oh, this is like Zima or Smirnoff or whatever those ones are," and I was like, "Oh, okay," and so drank it and didn't stop drinking it and ended up throwing up in the front lawn of that guy's house. And the next day he was like, "Oh man," like his parents like let us party at his house, but he was like, you drank in our, or you threw up in my front yard. My parents are gonna be so mad." I was like, "Well, they shouldn't have let us drink at their place." And I just took off from there. First time I got in trouble was like jungle juice and like a big old trash barrel at some party in Indiana. Like it's when you think of Indiana, you think jungle juice in a trash barrel. Like that's, in my opinion, that's like what you think. It's Indiana. But like, that's just how real it got. And that was like, yeah. So from 14 on, it was just a tear. And I drank pretty consistently throughout my childhood, like throughout high school.
How was high school? Was it?
Oh boy. How was high school? High school? High school was, oh boy. My dad was the principal of my high school. My mom was my teacher, and my brother was a senior. I was a freshman. And my other siblings would substitute teach. So we were just a family affair in my high school. It was a private religious school. And so it was very much, I was very much like the rebel I remember I got randomly drug tested twice in a month, quote unquote, randomly by my father. And because I was dating the junior in high school that was like the class clown and whatever. And high school was like my first few years were sports, and I got suspended for smoking from two volleyball games, and I was like playing basketball and volleyball, cheerleading, softball. I was doing all this stuff, and then but I was like I was just super rebellious, and like I just partied on the weekends with all the other kids and like just got away with everything. I'm the youngest of four, so it was kind of at that point my parents were like, meh, we tried. Like, she's the last one. And so, but by my junior year of high school is when I was like, forget sports, I'm doing theater. And I switched and I did a 180, and there was like, I dealt with a lot of bullying in high school. I was like, I was deemed like, the thing is if you kissed a boy, you're a slut, and that's how it was in a private Lutheran high school. It was just that. It was just that. That's how it was. It didn't matter. I just didn't. A lot of people treated me differently because of that, and I think it really played an effect on my drinking and just how I was socially and how I kind of changed, like, and became who I was. I should say actually that my freshman year of high school, I overdosed when I was 14 on Tylenol, and it was a suicide attempt, and it was really like the start of the end. You know what I mean? Like the start of the end of my, I don't know, of my childhood. It like really knocked me into like projecting through my high school years. So high school was really, really challenging for me. But by my senior year, still fully a smoker, fully drinking on the weekends, and sometimes during the week, like it would be cool if you could get away with it by like drinking in class, or kind of how it felt was like I could get away with anything because my parents didn't really care anymore, and they still loved me and they were still there for me and they were still like good parents, but it was just different. Like my sister, the oldest, she got one end of it, and she had very strict parents where I had like not strict parents. And you would think with, them being teachers and things, it would be a different way, but it just kind of wasn't. And so I think when it happened, it was really like trying to be seen, as well as trying to find a way out. So for me, it was a suicide attempt, but it was also like a cry for help. From my family. And then from there, that's when I started, I did therapy for like a year and a half. I was on medication for a little bit. And then after that, I, got better. I was cured. But that's not the case, obviously. So that was kind of how it all went. And then by my senior year, I had gotten into an acting academy in Los Angeles, and I was like, it was my dream to just, since I was in, I think 8th grade, I did a family trip. We get to choose like where we want to go. And I wanted to go to Los Angeles, and I just always wanted to act, and I always wanted to do theater. And I always wanted to perform, like since I was really little. My dad was like a theater director, so I always was like around it. And so I got into this acting academy, and that's really how I got out here. But I was out here for 4 months for my first semester, and I actually got into a really horrible situation with somebody back in Indiana and moved back for a year and was in a very like abusive relationship for a year of my life. And then I moved back to California, and I've been out here ever since. I think that was like 2009.
And drinking alcohol, getting into into show business in general, because you've done
Mhm.
acting, you do stand up, um,
Mhm.
writing, and all that stuff. How do you as somebody who just moves out there from Indiana, and it sounds, this sort of very, for lack of a better word, that cliche story of a Midwest
Mhm.
person going out to pursue acting in this dream, and doing it, and you've done it. How do you navigate what I imagine to be a very, alcohol is a currency in bars when you're doing
Mhm.
stand up or you're performing of any kind.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess in the beginning it doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm sure that it was readily available. Drugs, alcohol, I don't know if that was in your story
Yeah.
going back there.
Yeah. I would say it was. And the thing was is when I moved back after that relationship ended, that was like another thing that I would say like age 14 and age 18 to 20 were like big moments in my life that really like propelled me into a new like level of adulthood. So when I moved back to California and to Los Angeles, I mean, I remember jugs of Carlo Rossi on the
Hmm.
regular becoming a part of my weekends. You know, just but in that at that time I was, 20, 21, and that was normal. Everybody around me was
Sure.
drinking just as heavily as I was. I thought, and blacking out as often as I was. I thought blacking out meant you did it right. Like, I thought blacking out and not
Yes.
remembering was cool. And I was like, oh, okay, that means like I achieved it. Like I got to the drunk part and not even understanding the safety aspect on top of just being an alcoholic. Like I didn't understand it. And as, the years went on, I was drinking everybody around me. And I also bartended for a long time. That's where a lot of my drinking went down. I was bartending for like 5 years, and a lot of my drinking happened there, kind of for obvious reasons. One, to get through it, because it's a really tough industry to be in as a woman. But also, like, it was easy. It was free. They didn't know that, but I was free.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and like, they'll fire me. Just kidding. I quit. But, but yeah, it was, being in this industry. It's interesting though in Los Angeles, and I hate to say this because somebody told me it when I came into a room. I was like, oh, I'm just here on a court card. And they were like, actually, in Los Angeles, being sober is cool. And I was like, what? And what's weird is it's become cool. There's like a lot of people that do it, and not, just um, because they're alcoholics, but for health reasons or like, body image and being in this industry. But it it is normal. It is normal to have alcohol at events, sponsored by events. And the thing was is I would make sure that I was at those events or I was a part of those things. Like I didn't perform on stage sober until I got sober. Like when I was in a sketch comedy group for years, is really where I started kind of doing comedy after I got out of college. I joined this group and I was with them for a few years, and we would like hand out beers during the show, um, and slowly like my routine before a show that I had to have this like routine was like I would get one of those big fucking Newcastles that you get at like 7-Eleven.
Oh yeah.
And it went from one of those to I had to have two of those before a show, and then I would have to have two of those, and I'd have to make sure I had something during the show, and then where were we going after the show? What was our local bar? Um, once I started going to a bar a few times, and I'd be like, how does this guy always remember my order? That's when
Hmm.
things started being like, one, I thought it was cool. Like I always thought drinking was just cool. Um,
Yeah.
and because I feel like, I mean, I hate to say society, but like they make it seem just like, oh, well, you have a glass of wine at the end of the night. And I was like, you have a bottle or two of wine at the end of the
The
night.
first one's
That's,
just to get
yeah,
warmed up, right? And
exactly. Oh,
um
man. Yeah.
how would you say, because we talk a lot about this on the podcast, as myself and my co-host, as artists of any kind.
Hmm.
How how has your performance changed from when you were drinking and performing? Not only how you felt about it and maybe how it was perceived versus when you got sober and would get up on stage and perform. Um, did you
Mm-hmm.
find that transition difficult? Were you concerned that sobriety would bring a stop to what? I mean, did you imagine that alcohol was the fuel for creativity at any point?
Yeah. It was the like you would anyone I feel like would think, but this is for me. So for me, um, it was it was the icebreaker to get on stage. Like didn't have
Yeah.
to worry about if I bombed or if a joke didn't land or if I was, I really like outrageous comedy. Like my favorite, one of my all-time favorite comedians is Kristen Wiig. I just think I love how
Mhm.
quirky and weird she is. And so if I had enough alcohol in me, I could do that because I would have the strength to push through. And since getting sober and performing, like I didn't really even do stand up until I got sober. I was too scared to do anything. I did a lot of sketch comedy, I did a little group comedy. And so when I got sober, one of the things on my bucket list, like for life, was just like, I want to see if I can do this on my own. And what's interesting is like getting sober gave me that ability, which is weird because you would think about it the other way, but it was just like I've always had this determined to like I've always been the type of person that wants to face my fears. Like I'm terrified of heights, but I fucking love roller coasters. And like I'm that person. Like I went skydiving for New Year's Day. Like I want to challenge myself. And so getting sober has really honestly like kind of changed my perspective and made me like force myself to do things that are going to challenge me and scare me. And so like being able to really feel feelings is what has been like the biggest challenge in sobriety and also the most exciting thing. I was just talking to someone recently about like when you feel that pain of like of sadness or fear or whatever, it's just showing you that like this is one more hurdle to jump through. Like, and before I couldn't feel that because I was numbing it out. And I remember specifically, like, we had these two huge opportunities to perform for a festival in San Francisco. And the first year went incredibly well. I got like general meetings with people, um, you know, uh, for these studios and stuff. And then we got asked back in the next year. It was my alcoholism had just taken like to a whole new level because by the time I went on stage for our performance, like I was so blacked out that I was like mumbling. I couldn't really get the words out. I remember my boyfriend at the time was just like, you need to slow down. And I was like, what the? And I would get so defensive. I was so quick to get angry. And I still struggle with that to this day. It's like my biggest character defect is my defensiveness.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I remember just like, I wouldn't say I ruined that up. I mean, maybe I did ruin that opportunity. I don't know. Maybe this is something I haven't really thought about too much yet, but I do remember it being like a big moment because I noticed it in his eyes and I knew it in my mind and like I could see it. And then that night, we they had these nights where like all the performers would like go out and like go mingle and network, and I passed out. And a few people wanted to go. My friend wanted to wake me up, and my boyfriend was like, let her sleep. Like because he knew if I got up I would just back to it and just keep drinking. Um so it's interesting because as a performer, like looking back, it's like I don't ever want to say I regret, what happened, like what I did to my career by drinking all the time and constantly being hungover. But I will say that like I definitely missed out on opportunities. I definitely could have pursued things better, but you
Yeah,
know, yeah.
I was gonna say is I had a very similar moment. I'd always wanted to be a radio DJ. I wanted to be a radio DJ since I was in high school and listening to college radio back in the 90s when it was still cool, quote unquote. And one of my best friends from high school I went to high school in Vegas, and he ended up
Mm,
being the first tour manager for the Killers. And I went to high school with the drummer, and this years go by, and they're on tour, and it's a big thing, and they're playing the Key Arena in Seattle, and we're there, and we're backstage, and it's awesome, and it's rock and roll, and my friend Ryan, he says to me, I would really, introduce you to these people. He was talking about getting me a job with some aspect of it. I don't remember. I was so drunk. He says, "But John, you're just too drunk. I can't introduce you to these people."
yeah.
And in of all those times of blacking out and forgetting, that one sticks with me. Was this, no, you can't do it because you drank too much, and that's sort of like, well, shit. So
Yeah.
I understand the feeling of, and I know regret is not really a very useful tool these days for me. So I don't think I carry too much regret, but it's always there like that. And I guess I use that more so as a reminder now today as to why I do not want to fall back. Why, even though it might be a beautiful day for an ice cold beer, that where it can lead.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you mentioned too being hungover all the time. I
All the
mean,
time.
what a what a waste of energy and time and doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah. All the time. Oh my fucking God. All the time. I think about that so often. The other day, I had a work meeting and it was supposed to start at like 8 a.m. and I was making coffee and one of my things I will not give up is coffee. Um, for right now, but
Yes.
that's where I'm at right now. I love it. But I was making coffee and for some reason I started getting lightheaded and I was like, oh, I just need to drink water. I don't like water. I never liked water. This is why my hangovers were fucking gnarly. I don't like water. And so I started getting lightheaded and I get on this call and I was like, oh my God, I haven't felt like I was going to throw up since I used to drink. Like that nauseating feeling. And I would just power through. I was like, who knows? I thought I was the like queen of getting through a hangover and just plowing through the next day because I was hungover all of the time. So I just had to make it work. I couldn't eat because anything it would just make me nauseous. I wouldn't be able to smoke cigarettes because it just made me nauseous and I would just have to wait until it was the appropriate time to drink again because I was so hungover every single day. And now I think back and I'm like, I don't even know how I did that. Like, bravo for trying to get through hangover after hangover and
Yeah.
plowing through because now I could. Oof, it was the worst though. It was so terrible.
I
um
I tended
yeah.
bar I still do,
Oh,
for
nice.
15 years. And I think that was part of it, was that I always knew that one, I was going to go where the alcohol was readily available and easy access. And two, if I had a beer or drink before work, like at the bar across around the corner or whatever, it wasn't that big a deal because I was in my element. I knew where I was going and I was going to be comfortable and it was going to be dark and everybody was going to be drinking and who was going to know? And so I think that
Hmm.
that was something that helped me to perpetuate. But trying to do anything before my bar shift was impossible, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Now, you tended bar there in LA while you were drinking? Did you continue to do so after you got sober?
I
Or
did. Yes. I recently left my bar in I think end of February. This
okay.
past February. Yeah, was my last
Was it
shift.
was
And
it
yeah.
hard?
What's interesting is so when my drinking was at its absolute worst, my sobriety date is Christmas Eve of 2017, which feels really cool. It's just when I couldn't do it anymore. I went through a really bad breakup, like a really, really bad breakup. He had been my friend for years and we were together for a very long time. And part of the reason we ended was my drinking and my depression. And, it was just, I was a mess. After that, that was like September of 2017. And after that, I just like barrel rolled down, and I was drinking at my bar all the time. But there was one lovely evening where I was drinking and drove home yet again. And I actually got pulled over this time. And I remember when I got pulled over, the cop was like, the second I rolled down the window, he's like, it smells like alcohol. And I was like, yeah, I'm a bartender. And he was like, okay. And I was like, pfft. And he's like, I can smell it on you and like on your breath. And I was like, I bartend. Like, I was so drunk. I thought that was like, hello, get out of jail free card. I'm a bartender. And he's like, no. And so after, doing the tests and knowing immediately right then and there, I was like, and I had already been wondering, I was in really intense trauma therapy, and I knew from talking to my trauma therapist, she was like, you should start going to meetings, and you should start like, kind of figuring things out. And I was like, okay. And yeah, sure. And when I got pulled over, that didn't stop me, of course, but that was really where I realized that I really thought I had a problem. And then I had to, do certain things in order to not get put in jail because I blew so high. And after that is when I still was bartending and still drinking. But then I was like, well, if I'm going to drink, then I'll just Uber to work, and I'll figure out a way to get home, or, and that was kind of my, my way to resolve it. So then once I finally got sober and I was bartending, I had kind of already pulled back from drinking at work. Because I was like, well, I know I can't drink and drive. I know I can't do that. So I'm just going to have to figure out how to not drink at work. And, it was just like a lot of soda waters and cranberry juices and things of that nature to just try, and like coffees. It was,
Yeah.
it was not fun. But once I got sober, and I still bartended for a year and like 2 months. It wasn't hard to be around it. Like, the obsession had lifted for sure. You know, from the moment that I woke up on Christmas Eve, and I remember I said to my sister, I was like, I can't anymore. I can't. And
So was it more of a cumulative thing, or was there a specific moment where was there a moment of clarity, or was it just
it
drank too much?
was I was having like a lot of really bad blackouts. There was a lot of, so yeah, it was kind of like like what I like to think of is when you like skip a rock on a lake and it just like bounces and then slowly it just sinks in. That's like what mine was feeling like. It was like just bouncing until it just sank. And the night wasn't anything crazy. Like, the night before, it was like just supposed to be this, regular day with my sister and like having a nice day. And next thing I know, I'm pounding Evan Williams, supposed to be making like old fashions at home. I loved old fashions. And then I just loved whiskey, and then I just loved straight whiskey, but it went from like buying one of those big $20 Evan Williams at Ralph's to, going out for sushi, pounding that, and then waking up in the morning and being like, that's not how the day was supposed to go. Getting in fights with my family. And it was just like, it wasn't, I've had friends that have gotten sober and they had like big bottoms, where the next day they were like, I actually cannot do this anymore. I might die. And I think I had really bad blackouts, and I know I had really bad bottoms, but, that one was just like a just demoralizing, loathing, shameful, like, I can't believe I did this again, and that's not how this was supposed to go. And yeah, so that was like 2 months after my DUI was when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah.
And then So you're tending bar and
Hmm.
you are sober and figuring that whole thing out. I know that for me, I found one of the tools that I used was that at first it was very difficult to not judge people in front of me and
Yeah.
be envious of people who quote unquote could just have a drink and enjoy themselves. But also I found that I would use the people that drank to excess as a nightly reminder of why I didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And it worked, it worked. And also I thought, well, bank tellers count money all the time and they don't steal money. So I guess I could pour vodka and I don't have to drink it,
Yeah.
So
That's
um
so funny. I have a full joke about that because people ask me or used to ask me all the time, like, how do you bartend and you don't drink? Because I was that type of person that I sometimes blab my story a little too hard. I'm like very
mhm.
much like, I'll deal with it later. And that's not great. So I I was very upfront when I stopped drinking. I told everybody at my bar because I thought, it was very easy. I was like, I can bartend and not drink. And so I had this whole joke, or I have this whole joke in my stand up, like, oh, well, do all lifeguards swim? Like, do all, what is it? Like, do all librarians read? Like, yeah, no, I have no idea how I do it. I have no idea. I just, like, one day it just was gone. It was gone. And, that's what they say, like, you know, it was lifted, right? And I think, yeah, it's so crazy because what I was noticing though, that even though I could bartend and not drink, I was emotionally the same person the second I walked into that bar. I had so many resentments at that place. I did not get along with, people that owned it. It was just like it was a whole thing. And I was noticing that even though I wasn't drinking, I was still the same person. And that's what ultimately got me to leave is I couldn't continue getting healthy being there.
Mhm.
Um, and, you know, I've been to great environments where I know, like, and the thing that was beautiful too is there's people around me too, other coworkers of mine that were also getting sober or had been sober. So that was really helpful to be around that. And we would like kind of powwow when we got to each other and that person would be like, oh, like I'm really struggling, like I got like a drip of it on my mouth, and we would like kind of have powwow and have our own little like sharing meetings together in the corner, um and kind of help each other out. And like I honestly think like that was also a big part of what kept me sober that year of still bartending, was like being around someone else that really needed me just as much as I needed him. And we could just really relate about everything that we were struggling and going through. So that was really, really helpful. But yeah, ultimately it was just, it was just, I was still angry. I was still so angry, and,
Yeah.
it wasn't helping me heal.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't know any other job because I would hear it in the rooms too, and they'd say, "Well, it's not like somebody, like you slipped and had an accident and got a mouthful of beer, and it was the only job where I was changing a keg and literally didn't do it right, and it would just like shoot right in my face." And so
yeah,
it was just like, no, it really is an occupational hazard, I swear. And
yeah.
I had a couple of times where, well, one of the very first times within the first month of sobriety where I went to a bar that I used to work at and I knew the bartender and he just slid this drink that he was just some different drink he was making. And without thinking, my hand went in for the straw taste. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm flush, I'm hot. I freaking out. Like, what is happening? Am I going to turn into a werewolf right now? And I didn't, and that was, but I still don't count that necessarily because my
Yeah.
intention was not. And that's something that I struggled with. I didn't tell anybody about a straw taste for the
Mhm.
longest time because I was
Mhm.
scared that it meant I was, I don't know, weak or whatever. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've heard I remember hearing things about that. And for me it's like I I remember one time I was bartending and like it genuinely did get on my lip and it felt like a spider landed on me. I was like, get off, get off, get off, get off, get off. And I was like freaking out. Like, and now it's, and then towards the end of bartending, like it wasn't like that, but I would have these moments where um I could be around it most of the time, but there would be these one like little instances where I would like, I had this whole joke about getting lightheaded off of a cold brew. And I did. Like, I got full blown lightheaded off of the cold brew. And on stage, I say it in a haha, like, look at me. I still got it. Like, I can still like stumble and make it work. In that moment, I was having a panic attack because I was like, this feels the same. And now all I want is more things to make it feel this way, like lightheaded, out of like, because you don't remember that kind of those memories anymore. You don't really remember that feeling after a certain amount of time. You don't remember what it's like to not be in control of your body, when in those moments before, all you wanted was to not be in control of your body. Like, you just didn't want to be in your mind. Well, for me, I didn't want to be in my mind. I didn't want to be aware. I just wanted things to be easier. I wanted to load off. And then in that moment, like drinking a cold brew, I got lightheaded at my bar, and I was like, I don't like sour beers, but let me try this, like, and I didn't, thankfully, but it's interesting that that's your mind is a tricky, tricky bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you find being in comedy clubs and stuff like that now as a sober person is difficult?
Um,
Are there any aspects, are people usually respectful when you say,
I yeah, I actually find it interesting because in the comedy world, there's a lot of sober people. I think a lot of comics usually struggle with some sort of addiction.
mm-hmm,
So it's not it's interesting because you find the people that are like you find the sober people, you find the people that understand it, or they, somebody in their family went through addiction and they can relate to it, and or they're struggling with something else, some other demon. It's like demon. I don't want to ever fucking say that again. But they they struggle with it, and it's interesting because yeah, it really isn't. I guess I'm also not let myself go there mentally, like to think about, oh, I'm missing out. Because for so long when I was bartending, I was missing out because I was working, Friday, Saturday nights. I wasn't going out with all my friends. So I was partying like by myself. And then I would drink really heavily when I got home. And I think, now being in clubs and stuff and like, and being around other comedians, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, no, I never was really like partying like this before
okay.
because I was always bartending. But no, I don't think, honestly, for me, it hasn't been super difficult. I think sometimes it's like, oh, like you have that like FOMO feeling of like fear of missing out, of like, oh, everybody wants to like go grab drinks. And then I have noticed sometimes like people are like, is it okay if we drink around you? And I'm like, I bartended for like a year in
Yes.
sobriety. I'm totally fine, guys. And then you get used to making the haha jokes that are like, people are like, and you're like, ah, this would kill somewhere else. But
Mm-hmm.
when you just want to be so honest, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I guess that when I think about all the comedians that I listen to or read, and whether it's Mark Maron or Pete Holmes or Russell
Yeah.
Brand or um I know I'm missing a few other ones in there, and it's helped me so much to listen to people, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you as well is um people who tend to be open with their feelings,
Hmm.
with the really, really awful bad stuff, and to do it on stage, and all the mental health issues that oftentimes are found in that um,
Hmm.
in that career path,
Yeah.
and then to see people who have come out of it, and
Yeah.
because it's very easy to it would be very easy to continue to drink. And
Yeah.
I mean, for anybody, but I imagine in show business as well, there's plenty of people who would help you on your way to a path of self-destruction. And so to see people who decide not to do that, and again, also that it's 2019 and there's so many people who aren't, and that like you said, it's cool now, which is like, it's cool now? Like shit. Like
Maybe
I
I just say that to make it cool.
yeah.
I'm like,
Well,
hey guys, it's
that
cool now.
it's
Everybody, it's
cool.
fucking cool now. Be sober.
Right. So,
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, that's the thing that's so it's interesting because I didn't really, you know, I the first time I was honest about how I was drinking, besides everybody around me being like, Jeneta drinks a lot. I'm like, what are you talking about? Everybody else pounds 4 bottles of wine a night. And realizing that's not true. And, until that breakup happened, I really wasn't like, I would go to a therapist after like a relationship ended or something like traumatic happened to me. And the second that my drinking started to get questioned, I'd be like, you know what? I think I'm cured. And then I would leave that therapist and I would go on to the next destruction in my life and I would come back. And this was the first therapist that I was fully honest with. And I was like, this is how much I drink. This is how I drink. And it was through um that she coincidentally I went to her for trauma therapy for EMDR and she coincidentally happened to also be an addiction therapist and I had no idea.
what
And she
is
started what?
I'm sorry, what is EMDR?
EMDR is a form of trauma therapy. It's like I'm going to botch this, but it's like a way to connect the physical trauma with the mental trauma.
Okay.
So it's like connecting the body to the mind. It's kind of the new, it's like the, because there's talk therapy, and that's kind of getting like the old way, and this is the new way that it's working. So it's like it's a lot of relation to the way that animals like when an animal gets like attacked in the wild, it's like the fight or flight kind of thing. And so an animal usually like runs away or freezes, and that's the whole like PTSD thing of it. But then there's this way that this person saw that this animal would shake it out of its body and then it would be able to like go on with the day. And as humans, we usually just stuff things down and we don't really like release it, and it kind of just stays in our body. So when I get like triggered by something that's really like might not seem like anything, it can emotionally take a toll on my body and on my mind. And so it's a form of therapy that I've been doing for the whole time that I've been sober, even before. um but when I went to her, she she happened to be an addiction therapist and I had absolutely no idea. And so she's the first one that started telling me about like ways that you can get sober. Um, and that's, I like 100% give my sobriety to her, you know.
Yeah.
She's the one that like showed me. Because I had family that was like went to rehab and I had, but nobody talks about it. And I think as I'm going full circle, I think for me, it was when I got sober, I wanted to scream it from the mountaintops because it was like this new thing it consumes your life when you get sober. It's everything you eat, drink, breathe is sobriety
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you have to do. Um, or I had to do. And I wanted so badly to help people that had been through trauma and had struggled with addiction, and I really wanted to be able to use that in my comedy and give a voice to these people that were struggling with these things because it's something that I struggled with, and I felt like if I had heard it more or if I had seen it more, or maybe I was just blind to it, but like if I had seen it more, if it had been discussed more and talked about more, like maybe I would have been quote saved sooner, who knows. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just like I think it's so powerful when people get to like fully open up about the things that have happened to them and either bring light to it or just um, open up about it. Like I recently got this opportunity to perform with a bunch of sober comedians and for a room of sober people. And it was like the most powerful experience because one, I got to be fully transparent about my sobriety. And also it was just so honest and raw and real. And that's what like kept me sober is that vulnerability and that honesty. And that's what I love about comedy is that that's what can make people laugh the most is because they can relate to it. And, with me peeing on a wine rack is kind of like,
Well, and I think the joke
yeah.
is well, and the thing that struck home about the joke was not just the peeing on the wine rack, but that
Yeah.
this idea that we come out of this alcoholic fog and these things that people that adults are supposed to do, all of a sudden becomes this sort of almost like this and you joked about it, but this source of
Mm-hmm.
pride. Well, and I peed on the toilet like an adult, and so
And
and
now,
you
yeah.
begin to see all of the just all the ridiculousness and all of the horrible behavior that was not doing anyone any good, and certainly
Yeah.
not myself, because I was right there doing the
Yeah.
same kind of shit. And so I think, it's great. Like I listened to you say a room full of sober comedians with a room full of a sober audience. I just imagine, the energy, the focus, the level of respect and empathy and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why it's always great to go to meetings for me, is because people say whatever they want and everybody is open to it and accepts it, and very rarely is anybody heckled or booed for anything. um
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
what an awesome
Yeah.
thing to be a part of.
Yeah. It was incredible. It was so, I mean, it was the most like, it was the coolest thing I've gotten to do thus far in like any form of my comedy. And yeah, it's, I was going to say something that you just said about, yeah, because for me, like growing up, I grew up in a very religious Christian Lutheran home and community, and it was so much fear based, and it was so much like you're bad, you did wrong, like, and to be in a community, and just to be like a sober human and be like, yeah, this happened to me, but how can I, like, what can I do now with these things that happened to me? And how can I like help others? And how can I tell my story that's going to be a way that can maybe reach somebody else and help them? And like, even before I got sober, I have been doing like a lot of work in Los Angeles. Like I work a lot with the Downtown Women's Center. I work now for an amazing company that helps Alzheimer's patients. Like it's always been something that I've loved to do, especially like in Los Angeles. Like the homeless community is ridiculous. It's overtaking the city, um, and a lot of that is the same struggles, is addiction. And
Hmm.
if there's a way that we can all like be more honest and communicative and like be talking with each other honestly and openly, and I'm not saying like you have to like crack yourself open and like spill out all of your truth, but to just relate to people on more of a real level is just what I found in my sobriety. That is like the number one thing that keeps me sober, is even in any of my friendships, my relationships with people that may not even be sober. It's like, I need to have healthy, honest relationships in my life. I can't hold on to this like resentment crap anymore. I just need to have this vulnerable honesty with people. And it's what I find beautiful. And I think it's also what like a lot of how, television is turning and the industry is turning now, is getting to that more honest place of, with the Me Too movement and with
Hmm.
Time's Up and with all of this, people being honest about their addictions and mental health. Like that's another whole thing that like wasn't on that clip that was from the Laugh Factory, was everything I talked about with my depression and how I've struggled with not even having like the cool mental illness. Like I have depression. Nobody likes to talk about depression. Everybody wants to talk about anxiety because anxiety is the cool one. Like, and like,
I heard
um,
that one too. Yeah, that's good.
yeah, it's just it's silly. But anyway, yeah. So that's the type of comedy that I love. That's the type of like industry I like to be a part of, and that's things that I want to create and continue to create is a safe place for people to talk about their trauma and their addiction and their mental health. So, yeah.
That's great. Is there anything that you are struggling with today in your
Mm.
sobriety? Is there any one part that is more difficult than the other, or?
Mm. I think there's a few things that are that I've been struggling with probably more recently. The change, you change so much, and the people around you might change in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's been really hard. I have like an amazing group of friends. I have you know, a group of sober friends. I have an amazing group of non-sober friends. I have people that like are the reason I got sober because they saw, like, I could see it in their eyes that I was destroying myself, and they loved me so much that they, you know, had to be like, I love you, but you got, like, something's got to change. And I think it's just something that I've been, feeling a lot lately is like, you're just on different frequencies sometimes with people that are in your lives, and sometimes you're on the same frequency and sometimes you're not. And I think what's been hard for me right now, it's like the one way I could probably relate it to people that aren't sober is like, when your friend gets married and you're still single, or when your friends have kids and you don't, like, you're just in a different place in your lives. And I think that's been probably the hardest for me lately, is knowing that, like, I'm constantly looking to change and grow and figure out how to better myself, and like check my, wrongs, and check myself, and, also try and get out of my fucking head. And I'm not like the end all be all, and all those
Mm-hmm.
things that, you want to keep growing and keep getting better. And then, there's people around you that are just growing and getting better in different ways. And
Yeah.
maybe they don't struggle with the same things that I struggle with. So that's always been like, well, that's more recently been the thing that I've been feeling a lot. And then just always, my past, as we do this process, your past starts, the onion starts peeling, and you
Mm-hmm.
start getting to the center, and the center's really brutal. And you start seeing why the fuck you are the way you are. And that's been also pretty rough for me, as well as, seeing the truth. But at the same time, with that comes such beauty, because you get to just become this new person and
Yeah.
keep growing
So,
and changing.
and then with being this new person and being this sober person, I'm wondering, what are the, like, are there any guiding, um, are there any, what did I write? Are there any like guiding principles that you use on a daily? Like, what does your program consist of? Like, you personally, as far as, I don't know, prayer, meditation, writing, any of these things
Yeah.
that you find helpful in daily sobriety?
Um, Meditation for sure. Prayer is very hard for me, but
Hmm.
I'm constantly working on it. Like I said, grew up in a very religious home, so that one's always struggled, is a struggle. But I live in California, where, crystals and tarot cards are super fun. And, moon cycles and moon fairies, that's my thing.
Hmm.
It's just all this hippie shit, because
Uh-huh.
witches and potions, just because I don't know, I need something to try and connect to. It's
Yeah.
a daily struggle trying to find something. But I think my day to day is like, I love plants. I take care of my plants, and that's, I'm not an animal person. The whole thing in my stand up as well, but so my plants are kind of like the things that I take care of, like I'm taking care of myself. Um, and then another thing is, I have been directed to do this every day, and I wrote it on my mirror, because I struggle a lot with, um, the self-pity party, and also thinking I'm not good enough and I don't deserve it, or am I really an alcoholic, or, the self-deprecating things that I say in my brain to myself. And, and, there's like the little child that everybody talks about that's inside that you have to take care of. And so on my mirror, I wrote, "You're my favorite fucking person." And so every day when I wake up and I go to the bathroom and I'm in my bathroom, on the mirror, it says, "You're my favorite fucking person." And it just reminds me that like because it's really easy for me to make other people and other things like my higher power, and to make objects or relationships, boyfriends, girlfriends, it doesn't matter, like to make these people or these things a higher power, like was alcohol for me for so long. I need to remember that if the people that checked me when I was really struggling, I can't just be doing this for them, because I can't help other people if I can't help myself. And that's like the number one thing that I did right when I got sober, is being of service was the easiest thing in the world for me. I was like, great, don't have to think about myself. I can do everything for everybody else. And I completely put it into that. And, and I was directed to be like, nope, you have to figure out what self-love and self-care really means. And you really have to like check in and try and find some sort of spiritual practice. So on a day-to-day, it's really that. It's like, you're my favorite fucking person. I'm just, I gotta stay sober in order to like keep these people that I love around me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you want to let our listeners know where they could find you online or in real life, or is there anything going on coming up for you that you're excited about, or
where they can find me? My address. No, I'm just
no.
kidding. I'm just kidding. No, my Instagram is my name, Jeneta St. Clair. That's my real name. And what do I have coming up? I feel like, I'm doing like, I'm like, I don't know if I should say that. Yeah, I mean, I'm always posting stuff on my social media. So
perfect.
My Instagram and my Twitter, but I don't really use Twitter. So my Instagram's probably the best, but it's at Jeneta St. Clair.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for talking with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This has been really awesome.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.